It is an extreme honor for me today to be interviewing one of my friends, one of my role models, one of my idols, Dr. Abbas Fazel. How are you doing today?
I'm very well, thank you. And you?
You're actually, wow, this is a great way to end the day. I got a Ironman I would do every year in Tempe. This will be my second one, so I have to get up every morning at 4:30 and either every morning I got to work out for 3 hours from 5 to 8. It's either bike for 3 hours or run an hour and a half, swim an hour and a half. And then I had patients from 9 to 5 and had to work through lunch.
Wow.
And just got here at home, and it's a big treat to see your smiling face.
Well, thank you. You know, I've been following your progress on Facebook, of course, and I admire your will to try and accomplish that feat, which is commendable.
Well, I spent I'll be 52 this month, and I spent basically 50 years raising 4 boys and working my butt off, and I just put my health on the back burner, and I see guys like you rocking probably a 10% body fat and a 6-pack, and we'll talk about all those things. I just got back from climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, the tallest mountain in Africa, all because of you. And thank you for helping put all that together. I want you to start with that, and then also, I also want to ask you. You're an instructor. Arizona has 2 dental schools. And you're an instructor at one of those 1 day a week, and you're the real deal because you're in private practice full time and just do 1 day a week at the dental school. And when I was in dental school, the full time faculty were kind of one way, and the guys that were in the real world and came in 1 day a week, they were just it was just so awesome to have guys like you. And I want to tell you after you've been practicing over 35 years. What are you telling the dental students? What's your advice for them as they leave dental school? So let's start with your home country of Tanzania, which I just had the honor to visit, and with K2 Adventures, and tell them all about how you got into humanitarian dentistry, because that's a big part of your life.
Okay, well, it all started out with a guy named Kevin Shirilla. He was he was a PE teacher at the school that my kids went to, and one of his ambitions was to open a travel company and take people on adventure travel. So in 2003, that's when it all began. He started out by organizing trips to Tanzania to climb Kilimanjaro, and my kids were in the school, and we got a newsletter from him asking who would be interested in joining him on this trip. And of course, I just jumped at the chance because it was going back to my birth country, Tanzania, and the opportunity to climb Kilimanjaro, which I'd never done before. So both my daughter and I signed in on this trip, and we fortunately accomplished the feat. We made it to the summit just like you did, and it was a great feeling, a great experience to be on the top of Kilimanjaro, which is the highest. Actually, it's the highest freestanding mountain in the world. Everest is higher, but it's part of a range. So. It was an excellent feat, and anyway, so we stayed off and on in touch, Kevin Shirilla and I, and and as his company grew, he began taking people 3 times a year to Tanzania, and then he ventured on to Peru, where he took people to trek Machu Picchu. And so on. So
that's the highest mountain in South America.
Machu Picchu actually is not really a mountain. I think it's just a hiking. Yeah, it's alongside a mountain, but it's more of a trek, like a hike. And I think it goes through some villages and places where a lot of the indigenous people live. So it's supposed to be very scenic. It's not as strenuous as climbing Kilimanjaro.
What's the highest peak in South America?
I think it's the one in Argentina. I don't recall the name, but it's about 18,000 feet, I think. It's not as high as Kilimanjaro, but apparently it's a lot more difficult. You know, it's more of a vertical climb than Kilimanjaro is. So anyway, as he began going on these trips, he got to know a lot of local communities, the local people, and realized how fortunate he and his group were compared to the way, you know, the conditions of the people, the local people that he came across. So he decided to, you know, try and help in one form or another. So he would tell his clients that were joining him on these trips to perhaps bring in some items that they could donate. It started out with clothing, toys, things like blankets, etc. And you know, as he began doing this on a more regular basis, he decided to form a nonprofit a company here in the U.S. and joined forces with a lady called Kristen Sandquist, who is an attorney by profession, but has a you know, huge experience in nonprofit organizations here in the U.S.
I had no idea she was an attorney.
Yeah, she's an attorney by profession. But
why does that not surprise me? She was such an amazing negotiator in Tanzania. Unbelievably thinking on her feet.
Yeah. She's, I think, the backbone of this.
Oh, my God. If I had half her brain, I'd be the dean of the dental school.
Probably, yeah. So you know, they joined forces and, you know, formed a 501c3 corporation and started inviting people to join the board, and you know, and the company just grew from there. And so I came across them again. You know, we crossed paths again in 2009 when they were trying to when they were trying to help the local communities in these countries that they would arrange these trips to. And one of their main focus was an orphanage in Tanzania, in the town of Moshi, which is at the base of Kilimanjaro, Mount Kilimanjaro. And it really took them, you know, at heart, because there were kids there that had some severe debilitating diseases and life-threatening also. So and so they decided to literally adopt that orphanage, and it was in a very dilapidated condition. So they decided to, you know, to help in any way they could. And as it went on, they decided that these kids had absolutely very little medical attention and absolutely none as far as dental went. And they had a lot of dental problems that were causing them immediate concern because they were in pain and they could not get any dental attention. So they approached me and asked if I could maybe somehow be able to help in any way. And of course I jumped at the opportunity, you know, one, because they were kids with no dental access to dental care at all, and two, that it was in the country of my birth, and I thought it'd be a good way to give back to the local community. So that's how it all began.
And so for a person watching this on a video as opposed to a podcast, iTunes, when you say you were born in Tanzania, most people would think that you were African and you're Indian.
Right.
And I find it just so, I love history, and you might want to go into just a little bit of why there's Indians along there, and it all goes back to the spice trades from India to the Roman Empire. I think Rome was the first city that was a million, and to transport the spice, which was sugar and cinnamon and silk and clove. You literally have to have Indian families living every 100 miles all the way from India over to Africa, Somalia, Kenya, all the way up to Rome. And I just found I found it the most fascinating over there, learning about the ancient spice trials. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, it was not only just the trade. Yeah, a lot of the Indians would travel to Africa, the coast of Africa mainly to trade with spices, and but also when the British colonized India and began colonizing the African, parts of Africa. They weren't countries then. They decided that they needed help in the infrastructure, developing the infrastructure of these African parts, and so they brought in a lot of that's exactly how my grandparents actually got to emigrate to Africa, was because they were offered opportunities to help in the development of the infrastructure, mainly the railway system, railways and roads of these African areas, mostly in East Africa.
Well, that makes me feel better, because I felt it was shameful that you were involved in transporting sugar all the way into Europe, causing tooth decay, when here you are, one of the best dentists in town. So,
well, I don't know that.
So now I get to associate with railroads and roads and bridges, and not sugar on the spice trades.
Yeah. So that's how it began. They emigrated, settled in eastern part of Africa, and that's where my parents were born, and then that's where I was born. And once these countries were then divided by the British, and once they gained independence, the Indians that had emigrated there were given the opportunity of either going back to India or settling in Africa, in those countries, or they were given British citizenship. So my parents chose the British route, and that's how I ended up going to England.
And you graduated from dental school in England?
In England, yes.
Yeah. I love the British model. Wherever they sailed on Earth, if they put the flag there, it was a British colony. They had a lot of belief and faith in that flag. Hey, but I really like the humanitarian dentistry part for a couple of reasons. Number one, Jerome Smith turned me on to that 20 years ago. He was a dentist, and he said, let's go to Chiapas, Mexico, and do some missionary dentistry. And, I was just type A, and I had 4 kids, and I practiced and lectured, and I worked this in there, and all the way down there, I'm doing all these notes and all this stuff, and you just don't realize how stressed you are. And then you get off the airplane, and you go into a village that basically doesn't have running water, electricity, or sewage, where, the Earth has 7 billion people, and in 220 countries, and 20 countries live like us, and 200 don't, and 3 billion Earthlings live on $3 a day, and you just sit there, and it was just like a spiritual awakening where your stress just decompressed, and you realize the meaning of life is humans helping humans, and it just comes back. And I followed Jerome to Audioc, Mexico, and one of the 47 forums on Dentaltown is humanitarian dentistry. And what I find so many dentists who on their bucket list is to do something like this, but they've just never seen a chance or the logistics or who's doing this. And to go on Dentaltown and see these trips to Tanzania and to Dominican Republic and Mexico and Vietnam, and there's Climb for a Cause with Danny Bobrow, and it's just an unbelievable experience. Dentists, a lot of people used to say dentists have the highest suicide rate, but after the 10-year war with Afghanistan and Iraq, the soldiers, just blew everybody out of the water. I mean, their suicide rate is, if you divide it by 10, it'd be higher than number 2. And dentists they're so stressed, and I always think it's for 2 reasons. They spend way too much money. They live in way too big houses, drive too nice of cars, eat out 19 and 30 meals. They just spend. And then when they're stressed out of their mind, are you hearing sound feedback?
No.
Okay.
Fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then to decompress, they go to Hawaii for 2 weeks and rent a condo and drop another 20 grand, and half of it's on credit cards, and then they come back even more stressed. And I just can't tell you enough how many dentists are type A and need to get out and go to an underdeveloped country and see that they're happier than Americans. I mean, it was amazing on those trips at nighttime. They didn't have Facebook and they didn't have all these things, and they were just singing and dancing. I remember I was in Kathmandu, Nepal, and the city literally turned off the electricity at dark because they didn't have the oil to run it. And all the kids just went out in the street. They lit all the trash cans on fire, and they played soccer all night long. And I saw more laughing and giggling with barefoot kids playing soccer in the street with their parents sitting out on the porch than anything I've seen in America ever. And then one other thing that really blows my mind is that when you look at there's a huge new area of health research of studying macroeconomic data. You know, before, like when you're trying to figure out anorexia nervosa 30 years ago, you're just studying it in America. So you think all these inbred American thoughts. But then when you start studying around the world, you realize, wow, this disease really doesn't show up in poor countries. And what you see is that in the 20 richest countries, they're so stressed they have 5 major spasms: the brain, the whole headache, migraine, the TMD, grinding their teeth, the lower back, which is the entire chiropractic industry, the heart palpitations and angina, and the irritable bowel syndrome. And so many dentists look at that TMJ and they think, oh my God, they need braces or ortho or a night guard, or if I just did the perfect equilibration, they'd be solved. And it's like, dude, wake up. The person just got fired. They're about to go bankrupt. Their husband's having an affair with the secretary. Their daughter's on drugs. Their car doesn't work. I mean, they're stressed out of their mind. And a dentist thinks if he just adjusts the buccal cuspa number 4, that it's all going to go away. And it's not. In fact, the National Institutes of Health just did a study on 1 million lower back chiropractic and x-rays. And they could find, the chiropractors were like 51 to 49 on who was symptomatic and who was not, showing that there was zero radiographic evidence of a disease. It's psychosomatic. They're stressed out of their mind. And I just loved looking at their teeth, looking at the lack of wear facets. They didn't see the grinding and the bruxism, and God, they're just so relaxed, and they're so happy, and they're smiling, and they're singing, and they're dancing, and it's just a romantic, spiritual getaway. And I hope you turn on more dentists to this type of experience.
Yeah, I hope so too. I mean, there are so many opportunities, and it's just not in Tanzania, but so many other third world countries, underdeveloped countries, where the need is so great that they would be so appreciative of any little kind of help that they can get. And the area where I'm focused on is Tanzania, and again, what happened was when I was first approached by K2 Adventures, I went ahead and called all the dentists that I knew. I approached the dental supply companies, Henry Schein in particular, that were very, very helpful. Valley Dental at the time, which is no longer in business, but it was at the time, and they too gave me a lot of donated equipment. So what we did was Project Cure helped us a lot too. They helped ship all the equipment that we had acquired through donations. We also held fundraising events where we were able to raise money and buy supplies and some light equipment. And then we had it all shipped through Project Cure all the way to Tanzania. It took a few months, but it got there. And we actually were fortunate enough to get funding from a private local donor, a family that gave us enough money to build from scratch the building that we housed the dental equipment in. And so we all went there. We we took a builder, a technician, a dental technician, and a few other volunteers, and we all went. We set everything up. We did all the plumbing, joined all the electrical lines, connected all the equipment, and were able to start servicing these kids. And I've been going there every year since, and also the dental school has joined in a somewhat of a partnership, and has allowed us to take 6 of their students each year to Tanzania, and to work in the clinic there and on these children. So those students are just so fortunate to be able to travel that far and experience the firsthand at the type of people that live there, the dentistry that they can perform, and the help that they can provide to these kids.
And it was great at night when we'd go to dinner and a bunch of older dentists that have been doing it 25, 35 years, getting to talk to a bunch of kids in school, and those were great conversations, very rewarding. I want to touch on 2 other things I noticed when I was there. I want you to go into the fact that there's a lot of intense fluorosis on the teeth. There's a lot of very dark modeling of the teeth, and coming from the United States, I was thinking fluoridated water, and turns out that wasn't the case. Do you want to talk about that? You know far more about it than I do.
Yes, you see even I was amazed. And at first I thought it was the fluoride in the water, but apparently it's not. It's what the local community there does is it uses a salt from a lake to tenderize the meat that they use to cook, and that salt contains an enormous amount of fluoride, and they consume that. They consume the meat that's been tenderized by that salt, and so that's why it's affecting that population more than any place else. Even in the same, even in the country of Tanzania. So, that's where the source of the fluoride is from the salt that they use to tenderize the meat, rather than the water that they drink from the water sources.
So, if that degree of modeling, if it was from water fluoridation, the ocean is 70% of the earth, and it's naturally fluoridated, 1.4 part per million. In the cities in America, we go to half that amount, 0.7. But that intense of modeling, what would the parts per million fluoride be in the water?
I'm thinking it's over 2 parts per million, about 2.5.
To have that much modeling?
Right.
Yeah, I was guessing 3, basing it on Costa Grande days. In Arizona, we put fluoride in the water in Phoenix and Glendale and Tempe, but in Costa Grande, they have to take it out. And the highest ever I've ever seen was the Navajo Indian Reservation in Tuba City, naturally occurs at 44 parts per million, and the teeth were jet black. But for our listeners and viewers, that type of extreme fluorosis, how does that affect the teeth? Other than cosmetic, which I noticed it bothered the girls. The guys just giggled when you asked them. But how did it affect the teeth dentally?
Well, they had a lower incidence of caries.
Oh, yeah.
But yeah, it was mostly aesthetic, and it did cause some brittleness on the teeth. So it's more, the enamel is more likely to chip off.
But I looked in so many mouths I couldn't count them. I didn't see any bombed out rotten teeth.
No, I didn't either.
Yeah, it was amazing.
Yeah, they had lack of oral hygiene and perhaps some gingivitis, etc. But certainly no
bombed out teeth.
Bombed out teeth, right?
Yeah.
And but we did find that the people that the children that lived outside the orphanage had lesser incidence of mottled teeth and fluorosis because and more decayed teeth because they had access to sugary diet. The diet of the orphans that live in the orphanage, they're very restricted to what they can have because they can afford very little. So, but we did find a difference in the children that lived outside the orphanage. They had a much higher incidence because they had, access to sodas and carbonation, carbonated drinks and sugar items.
And the carbonated drinks, it's the acid. It's lowering the neutral water of 7 down to like 4, which promotes Streptococcus mutans and lactobacillus. I also want to tell our viewers that in America, to get fluoride to the diet, it was fluoridated water. But in the older communities, especially like Europe, where these cities were built thousands of years ago, the water supplies, a lot of cities would have like maybe 50 to 200 different water treatment facilities. And a lot of places in Europe actually fluoridated their salt, like America iodized their salt. When Truman was the president, they passed a law that said all salt had to have iodine in it to get rid of goiter because it was a nutritional deficiency. So we iodize our salt. Many communities in Europe iodize their salt, fluoridize their salt to lower decay. And Tanzania is getting naturally fluoridated salt from the riverbed. It's just way too high. But it isn't a very efficient mechanism. I also had another interesting deal about, I just love the macro epidemiology. One of the things that first turned me on to this was, ever since they started recording when boys go into puberty, it was just like back in 1945, it was just age 16 and it stayed age 16 till this day. But girls were trending down. And it got so bad that by the year, I think it was 95 or 2000, 10% of the girls in the United States and France were reaching menarche at age 10, and it was freaking everybody out. And both the United States and France knew it was our food industry putting all these hormones in beef and chicken and milk, and it was all man-made. Everything's man-made in so many people's minds. And Americans couldn't do anything about it because in America, our government's money comes first and everything else comes never. But France actually pulled together and pulled all the internet connection problem. There's a problem with.
Okay, I can hear you now. You were going
okay. Where did you lose me at in this story?
About the hormones and the American.
So France pulled out and banned all the hormones out of their food supply, and I think it was about 95. And they knew that the girls, lowering menarche would stop and start coming back up. And 10 years later, it had actually gone down even further, which was solid evidence that it's not the hormones in our food. So then epidemiologists started looking around the world and saying, well, is it going up anywhere? And it was going up. The age for girls reaching menarche was going up in Somalia and Ethiopia and areas that had famine. So then the evolutionary biologists figured out that if your diet is really, really rich, that would be a good time to drop an egg and be fertile and have a child. And if you weren't having a good food, that would not be a good time to reproduce, have offspring. So I love this international data. And Americans always blame obesity on McDonald's. You hear it all the time. In fact, there's even people who want to tax it like cigarettes for obesity. But I have lectured to dentists in 50 countries, and they all have a McDonald's on every corner, and Europe basically doesn't have any fat people. And you realize going around the world that the only place you find fat people is in cars. And in Europe, they walk to the McDonald's. They eat the same thing you and I do, but then they walk home. And then in the morning, they have to walk 1 or 2 miles to catch a bus or a train, and then it only gets them within a mile or two of their work, and then they walk a mile or two to work, then backtrack. And they just move. They move all the time. So it's not the food. It's the complete, we drive everywhere in a car. And then I went to Tanzania, and I did not see a single McDonald's in the cities we were in. We were in Moshi. What were the 2 cities we were in mostly?
Moshi and Arusha.
Yeah, and those were that Moshi was which was the one that had about 1 million people? Moshi?
No, that's Arusha.
Arusha had 1 million people. It didn't have a McDonald's, and I noticed there were basically 2 body types. There was bigger people that were obese, and then there were just skinny people with a hard 6-pack. And they were both doing the equal amount of walking, and it made me realize there has to be a genetic component to obesity, because you could definitely see the similar diet, the similar walking, the similar moving, and 2 body types. One more heavier like a lion and one more thinner like a cheetah. Did you want to talk about that?
Well, yeah, as you said, it's probably genetic. That has to do with the differences in their body weight. Yeah, but most people in poorer countries, Tanzania as an example, they do walk, they do bike, or they run. And that's why there are so many top athletes, middle distance and long distance runners that come from these countries, because that's what they do. Is they would get up and they would live 10, 15 miles from their school. Their home would be far out, and if they had to, if they had to make the office or the school in time, the only way they could do it, unless they could afford a bike or a motorcycle, they had to run. So, but I'm not sure about the genetics that causes the people to be obese. I'm not a geneticist, so unless you know why they would be obese.
Yeah, I just thought it was interesting, and we do have 3.6 billion genes, and I'm sure someday they're going to see there is a diet, exercise, and a genetic component to a lot of these disease, because you see around the globe, the one thing you do see around the globe is that the 3 fastest growing disease on earth are obesity, diabetes, and dental decay. Last year I was in Hong Kong, Kathmandu, and New Delhi, where those 3 cities, for the first time in their history of their civilization, opened up a pediatric dentist specialist who specialized in children. And I remember talking to Kathmandu dentists that were my age, in their 50s or 60s, that said the first 10 years they never saw a child under 10 with a cavity. They never saw one. And then the whole country went from drinking water to Coke and Pepsi. And then the teeth just went south. And I hear that all over Asia, Africa, Latin America, that when everybody was drinking water and walking, you just didn't have these diseases. And now everybody's switched water for soda. It's just gone to hell in a handbasket. So that was amazing. So we're halfway through. I've got you 32 minutes down. I only get you for 28 more minutes. I think guys like you, especially guys like you who are, you remind me of Mother Teresa and Mahatma Gandhi, humanitarian. I mean, you're the all-American boy, but you're so humble, and I don't think you give yourself enough credit that you've been practicing dentistry for 37 years. You teach 1 day a week. Let's spend the last 20 saying what would a 60-year-old worldly dentist who's been around the world. I mean, you've lived in London, Tanzania, the United States. You've practiced dentistry 37 years. You see these kids are coming out of school, 25 years old. They got $350,000 in debt. Since this last recession has been a kicker. I mean, Lehman Day was August 15th, 2008, and here it is, 2014, and the economy, you could only describe it as pathetic, apathy. It's not really sinking, it's not really going, it's just flat. Right. So if your daughter or son was walking out of dental school today with $350,000 in debt, what worldly advice would you give them?
Actually, you mentioned it. My daughter just graduated from the dental school, and fortunately, we were able to provide her with some funding. We had made allowances over the years to help pay for her tuition, and so, but she still has a debt. It's not as big as $350,000, but it's still there. And the first thing I told her is, don't go and buy a new car. You don't need one. Your car is 5-6 years old, and it's adequate. It will take you from A to B. So years ago, that's what dentists did and that's how they got into huge debts. Is they would go because they saw what their potential income was going to be like. Well, first thing they do is buy a fancy car and a fancy house, and before you know it, they'd be way up, up to their neck in debt. So, and she's pretty, savvy and smart. So, she's not going to go out, and she's content with the car. She's still living with us. She's not going to buy a house right away. So, she needs to get her footing in place. She needs to get some experience, become a better dentist. Because, in spite of all the schooling you get, you still can't, you can't be a top-notch dentist without a few years of experience behind you. So and she knows that time will come when she can afford those niceties in life. But for the time being, you have to start slowly and not just jump into fancy goods. It's just not necessary.
I want to say, as far as being a good dentist, depending on what procedures you do, you have to do 1,000 of anything to really get good at it. I mean, and everybody teaching on the circuit, whatever they're teaching, they've done about 10,000. So if you're on the circuit teaching endo, you've done 10,000 units. If you're teaching implants, you've placed 10,000. So a kid coming out of school, they've done, maybe 100 fillings, and you got to do 1,000 fillings just to be good. I've also noticed a couple trends with the guys versus the girls. There's 2 million dentists around the world, and in the 20 richest countries, they're all men. And in the 200 poorest countries, 1,500,000 of the dentists are women. And it's amazing. In the United States, there's no money in teaching. It's all women. And all the money's in medicine and military and marketing and Hollywood and Wall Street and insurance and banking and finance. And it's all men's in suits and ties wanting to make 6 figures. And I'm very excited that dentistry has gone from a male-dominated profession to now 45% of last year's graduating class from dental school was female. And I think the female touch to healthcare is going to be amazing, because I think I literally cried in Kathmandu. I met this woman dentist, and she had 2 helpers. She was my age. She'd been practicing for 30 years. And I asked her, I said, well, how much money do you make in U.S. per month in your office? And she says, I'm so lucky. My husband's an engineer and has a good job, and my office loses about $50 US a month, and he's always smiled and subsidized my job. So here's this woman working her butt off for 30 years and losing $50 a month in Kathmandu. That's just the woman mindset. Another thing I've noticed is the suicide rates. Women dentists, I only know of one case where a woman did it, and she was mentally ill. And the difference is the women dentists always marry men who have an equivalent amount of education. They're 30% of them marry dentists, and they're in school. They marry doctors, physicians, lawyers, engineers, bankers, finance. And the men notoriously go get some hot-looking chick who was the waitress at Hooters who will never make a dime her entire life. And the really good-looking woman married the geek, introvert, dorky dentist, lawyer, physician because they saw money. And they just spend. And so the dentists are all whining about their $350,000 in student loans when the men are all going to go marry a non-income earning person and buy a house that costs 1 or 2 times more than their student loan debt, and then drive a fancy car, yet they're an emotionally anchor to this student loan debt, which they ought to be grateful for, because if they would have worked at McDonald's and saved up for dental school, it would have taken them 20 years. But in rich countries, poor people have access to other people's money in student loans and stuff like that, and now they get to become a dentist on debt, and they would have saved up for it at $5 an hour, and now they get to pay down their student loans making $50 an hour. I bet you your daughter will probably marry a brain surgeon, Wall Street broker, whatever, and basically won't even, could.
Yeah. She's dating another dentist.
See, I mean, my God. I mean, is that a fact check or what? And the dentist, right? And the dentist in dental schools, I mean, if she looks rockin' hot in a pair of Levi's and she's at the waitress of the Waffle House, they'll marry her. And oh my God, I mean, the spending is out of insane. So the message here being lower your spending. We're all gonna
Exactly.
die. You don't need that big house. My car, I've got money. My car has 100,000 miles, and it's never blinked. Nothing's ever gone wrong. And my boys said to me the other day, they go, "Well, your car's 10 years old and it's got 100,000 miles." And I'm like, dude, I live 3.0 miles from my dental office and 3.5 miles from dental town, and my car has never blinked ever. Why would I need a new car? Yeah, so I got you for another 20 minutes. I'm down to we're 2/3 down. I only got a third left. Give them more worldly advice.
Worldly advice. Well, again, material things are just not necessary. Be humble. Be appreciative of what you have. And travel. You can only find out how other people live and how fortunate you are. If in America, I mean, the U.S., in my opinion, is the best place on the planet Earth to live in. But yet, a lot of people just don't seem to be able to appreciate that because, they still want more because they think they don't have as much as they should have, or as much as they're entitled to, or whatever reason, until they look at and see how other people and societies in other countries live. That's when they realize that what they have is second to none.
It's grotesque. It's grotesque what we have in America. I want to key in on an example from you. A lot of since you did graduate dental school in London, you hear a lot of people in America saying, "Gosh, right when England's dentists are getting out of the NIH system and it's a complete failure and they're all going private, now the United States is going into corporate dentistry and Obamacare and this and that." Why don't you talk about the two different delivery systems of dentistry in the United States versus England, the NHS, and what your thoughts are on NHS versus private insurance, and where it's been and where do you think it's going?
I have mixed feelings about both systems. I mean, really, they have advantages and disadvantages. The national health system at least provided access to everybody. Be it you are a millionaire or an unemployed person with no money at all, because the government provided for you. So in a way, in a sense, that is a good thing because you're providing care, much needed care, to everybody. And in a system, in a private system such as here. Obviously, if you can't afford to go to a dentist, and dentistry isn't cheap, people, may have severe toothaches, and they can end up in emergency rooms. So, and that can cost the taxpayer, a lot more than they would bargain for. So that's the sort of an advantage is access to the care for everybody. The disadvantages are that with everybody seeking care, you are inundated with a lot of patients. You cannot provide the quality for the kind of services that you want to, for the reimbursement that you get from the government, because they dictate what they'll pay you for the services that you provide. And it is obviously not enough because then the materials, the lab cost, etc., to provide good dentistry, it costs money.
Go ahead.
So that's the disadvantage, is that the quality suffers.
And that is a that is a human heuristic of oversimplifying complex things. I think it comes from Einstein's E equals MC squared. He just took this unbelievably complex thing and simplified it to a little equation, and people oversimplify everything. And these big complex problems, there is no simple thing, but I'd like to add a couple 2 cents on that. And that is, it was Churchill who said, my book I just wrote is Uncomplicate Business, Understand People, Time, and Money. And it was Churchill who said, if your people are uneducated and sick, you're not going to have very good workers. You can't grow an economy when everybody's sick and uneducated. And I would say the greatest societies I've ever seen were Scandinavia, Denmark, Norway, Finland, Sweden, where education and healthcare is free. And they have almost the lowest criminal rate because everybody still has hope. You know, like my kids change their major about every 6.5 nanoseconds when they were in college. But, you know, as long as the kid's staying in school, night school, trying different things, eventually his tires are going to hit the road and they're going to peel out. And when they're sick and not feeling good, they could always go to a doctor. But I just want to say one thing going around the world is that, you know, America's the oldest healthcare system, and it was complete laissez-faire, free market, and it's the most expensive. It's about $7,000 a year per person, and 50 million people don't even get coverage. And then after World War II, about 20 countries all started a national healthcare system, and they all had different variables. And it's amazing that the best healthcare system I've seen was actually Taiwan because it's the newest. It's only 10 years old. And Taiwan and Singapore had a chance to look at all the pluses and minuses of Canada and New Zealand and England and Germany and France and Italy and all these great countries. And their doctors are more incentivized, they work longer hours, they make a lot of money, everybody gets covered. So I'm really paying attention to Taiwan. Have you seen the Taiwan or Singapore newer systems?
Yeah, I have not, unfortunately, but from what you describe, I think it would be, you know, I wish that the Congress here and the, you know, the President, Congress, etc., could work together to provide this country with a system that would be, you know, good and reasonable in costs and access to everything.
Well, they're not. I think it's funny when you meet an American who's proud to be a Republican or proud to be a Democrat. I mean, it's like one robbed the bank and one drove the getaway car. How could you be? I mean, they're in collusion to insanity on their highway to hell. I mean, I can't believe people love one of those two parties. I equally hate them both. But let's not get into religion, politics, sex, or any of the controversial things. So what else? So we're down to 12 minutes. What would you tell a dentist who is not just coming out of school, who's been practicing 10 years, and he's just kind of flat in this malaise economy that's not really going anywhere? It's not rising or sinking. It's flat. You've done it for 37 years. You've seen it around the world. What advice would you give to that 30-year-old kid who just is flat?
Well, this is what I did. I found that, you know, when I started doing dentistry, it was mostly restorative, fillings, etc. But then you reach a plateau where you can only do so much. So what I would suggest is to expand your, you know, to expand your abilities. I went to USC in 2006 over a course of a year, each month, and trained to, you know, become more proficient in oral surgery, extractions, placing bone grafts, membranes, etc. I wouldn't call myself an oral surgeon, but I certainly, you know, am able to do those procedures and place implants. So that has really expanded my practice. I don't have to refer as much as far as, you know, implants go. That's one area of dentistry which is growing in demand. So that's what I looked into. Now there is another growing area is sleep apnea. You know, and it's the dentist that can provide such treatment to these patients. So just expand your horizon. There is so much more that you can do. Don't limit yourself to, you know, the restorative or endo or what have you. You know, be able to do more than
right. If all you can do is a cleaning exam, X-ray, filling, and a crown, that's one of your problems. That's flat. Back to implants. So are you have you gone from 2D panos and X-rays to three-dimensional CBCT cone beam? And what are you using? Uh-huh. And are you using it for just diagnosis, or are you also making surgical stents?
No, surgical stents too. I have the Facilitate software on my laptop. Actually, this laptop that I'm using right now. And so
It's called
that
facilitate.
facilitate, yeah, it's part of the Simplant. It's the Astrotech. What used to be Astrotech, now it's Dentsply.
Okay.
But I use the Astrotech implant system,
You use
and
the
their
what? The
software.
Dentsply's Astrotech. Okay.
Yeah. That's an implant system. I started out with the Nobel BioCare system, and then I went on to Astrotech. But they have their own software, which is called Facilitate, which is similar to Simplant. Simplant is the more widely known software system. So I can download the image from the images from the CBCT
Which
scan.
CBCT scan did you get?
Well, I don't have one. I send them
Okay.
out. So I send them out to other facilities where they get the scanning
And
done.
how much is
And
that
then
costing the patient?
Probably about a couple
And
of
are they
dollars.
paying for that, or is their insurance paying for that?
Sometimes they'll have to pay out of pocket. Sometimes their medical insurance might pay.
And do
cover that.
you request a certain type of CBCT? From what type
Yes.
of what do you request?
Well, it is. They convert it so that it's compatible to the software that
okay.
I have. So then I then download it into my software program. So now I'm able to view the images in every angle, even a 3D model of their jaw. So, and then I can virtually place the implant into that patient's mouth, basically, virtually. And then once, I'm very comfortable with how it looks in every angle, every position, whichever way you look at it. I can then send that information to a lab, or there are many companies and I send them study models, accurate study models of the patient, and they'll create a guide, or actually the software creates the guide. So then they'll manufacture it based on the design that I've made.
Glidewell just stopped doing surgical guides. They're the biggest lab in the North America, probably the biggest lab in the world. Modern Dental is the largest one in China. Glidewell is about 5% of the market. And Mike Totola just told me that they'd have to charge $600 or $700 for a surgical guide, and it's too much money. They stopped doing it. So who's making your surgical guides?
Well, I actually send it to, it's a company that's a subsidiary. It's called Materialize. It's a subsidiary of Astrotech. So, and they do charge a few $100s, but it includes the drills. The drills come with the stops. So, and they send me the criteria of, which drills to use in what sequence. And the patient, I have the patient pay the additional fee that they charge. I don't, make any money off of it. So say, for instance, the charge was $550 for the surgical guide and the drills. The patient just pays that amount. But I don't always use a guide. It's not necessary. It's a bit of an overkill. I'll only use it in where I really see the need. For instance, if it's very close to a sinus and I want to ensure that I place it in exactly the most desirable position, or if it's multiple implants, if there is 3 or more to be done, then I will definitely use a guide. So I do transfer that cost to the patient, and I explain to the patient. I show them the computerized images of how I've virtually placed those implants, and they're very impressed that it's more accurate in placing those implants. So
it is amazing when you go around the world, because there's basically no dental insurance in Asia, Africa, and Latin America. But the United States and Canada is about the only 2 countries where the dentist pays a lab bill and incorporates it in the fee. Once you leave the United States and Canada, everybody has the lab direct bill the patient. The dentist doesn't even get involved with it. So that's interesting how you pick that up. And also, I would give anything if you would create a 1-hour online CE course. You're in our backyard in Dental Town. Devin could help film it, where you just walk through a case or two, because I think dentists would love to see you do that. That would be amazing.
I have already, quite a few cases in my computer that I've stored. So either I can go through those cases, or a new one that comes up.
No, let's do it. I think the two fastest areas that I see exploding is implantology and endo, because 50% of the general dentists don't want to touch a molar, and they're shy. Most dentists have a personality of like an engineer, a scientist, a teacher. They're wickedly smart, but they don't like sales. They're not salespeople. They don't like to close. And a toothache, you don't have to sell. I mean, they come in, they're in pain, they hurt, and they're in this flat economy, and they refer a $1,500 hot tooth that wants treatment now to an endodontist. And so I see the online CE. We have 250 courses on Dental Town, and the endo courses are just exploding. And the other one is society's changing gears, where people just don't want to have a removable tooth. They don't want a partial. They don't want a denture. They don't want to. They cringe when you tell them you're going to file down 3 teeth. And the neat thing about implants is, you're not filing down the adjacent teeth. Streptococcus mutans and lactobacillus cannot eat this implant. Even periodontal disease differently. Remember, you can have a whole mouthful of perio, extract all the teeth, and the gums heal up beautiful, firm, and pink in a week. So gum disease is a huge interaction with the cementin and the tooth and dentin. And a lot of people say that implants get periodontal disease, but it's a completely different type. Most of the bone loss is from the flexing of the implant. I mean, do you see classic periodontal disease around implants?
No, not in my opinion. I have.
It's different.
I don't.
Yeah, I'm not a periodontist either, but it's totally different. The point I'm making is that when I go into nursing homes in my backyard and see people that I treated over the last 27 years, so many of those root canal buildups and crowns, they go into the nursing home, they got rheumatism, they got dementia, they got Alzheimer's. The diet at the cafeteria is all macaroni and cheese and cottage cheese and pumpkin pie. It's a carb fest. They all get infected with root surface decay, and in a year and a half, their lifetime in dentistry has turned to mush. And then there's those 2 shiny titanium implants, and everything's snapping down on them. And it almost makes me that, men, the average male in America lives to be 74. Average female lives to almost be 80. I really don't care about doing root canals and crowns on old men, because they're just going to go to the refrigerator and fall over dead someday. But the women just keep living on and on and on, and those implants and crowns.
For some reason.
That's okay. We were at 58 and a half minutes, so we're down to 1 minute. So, Dr. Abbas Fazel, wrap it up in 60 seconds.
Well, just, to let everybody know that it's been a great profession. I'm privileged to have practiced both in England and in the US, and to try and tell people that there is more to life than just making money, to try and help people in need, and to if they wish to participate in any of our humanitarian projects, to let us know.
And what is that website? K2adventures.org.
Yes.
K2adventures.org.
Correct.
And all of this on our podcast, all these information things will be in the notes.
Okay.
And also, I was wondering, I would love for our doctors to come and visit you, or you come visit us and show us what you're doing with this implant software.
Absolutely. I'd love to. So,
do you want to come down to Ahwatukee, or do you want us to all come up to Scottsdale?
I could maybe arrange to come to Ahwatukee if
I would be honored. We'd be honored. I would love to look at that new software.
Okay. All right. So maybe we can arrange it with your secretary, and and see what we can come up with.
The only thing bad about you coming down is I know you won't bring a dozen donuts.
No, I don't like donuts.
You're a clean eater. I watched you eat for a week. You're a clean eater. I should only eat what you eat.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for an amazing hour. And when you could come down to Ahwatukee and show us that software, we would love it.
Okay, I'd love to. And thank you. It's been a pleasure.
Okay, thanks, Abbas.
All right,
Bye-bye.